Today I'm so excited. I have Spencer Clapp as my guest. Spencer has a law degree, was a lawyer, an educator, retired educator now, and is a community activist, community volunteer. He's a leader, volunteer coordinator, world traveler, very interesting man, very interesting gentleman. So I was just so excited that you're here, Spencer. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Oh, absolutely, Kate. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Oh, good. And you just got back from Florida last night.
Yes, yes, very late. It was quite a difference between walking on the beach yesterday morning and then coming back to a snowstorm at Bradley Airport last night.
Oh, did you have to scrape off your car?
Yes.
I hate that.
So
one time my husband and I went on a trip and we were down in Florida and we came back and our car was in the middle of a snowbank. And
yeah, oh my God.
Yeah. I can feel your pain. Oh my gosh. But I really want to talk to you about something that just happened recently.
Right.
And it's in East Lyme and it's kind of getting a lot of press. So it's kind of important. And it's called Viking Firearm Training Facility, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct.
Okay. And one thing that's really so interesting about it, if we could just start with the name of it, Viking Firearm, because one of my best friends graduated the first class, and she was one of the ones who helped to pick the name Viking, and my daughter worked on the Viking saga. So Viking is a really strong name in East Lyme, and now we have a firearm training facility that's going to be doing shooting, teaching people how to shoot repurposed guns.
Right.
And not using ammo, but using something that's going to give them the kickback experience. You're a gun owner, so
that's correct.
Talk to me about it, because you know it's your wheelhouse, not mine.
Well, I just, one of the things I want to clarify is what you were talking about with respect to the Viking is that is the mascot of our high school athletic teams. So what you're doing is this company is basically trying to associate their facility with the East Lyme High School Viking mascot, and I just feel very strongly that those two things, should not be put together. That the Viking mascot name should not be utilized for commercial purposes.
I agree. I agree.
And of course, the other thing is that we do know from history is that the Vikings did not have firearms.
So it's a little bit of a misnomer. Why are they doing that?
It's completely a misnomer. And East Lyme has a very, very deep and rich history.
It does.
Very deep and rich history, and it goes all the way back to pre-colonial or colonial times.
Well, the Native Americans were here 400 more years ago, right?
Absolutely. So you have what we would consider to be so-called prehistory with the native peoples who were here, and then we also have a rich history, starting back in the colonial period and pre-Revolutionary War. We have patriots in East Lyme,
of course,
that they could have named the facility after that. One of our patriots.
There's so many options.
From the Revolutionary War, or even the Civil War, World War I, whatever you want to say from that.
Benedict Arnold would have actually been good.
Yeah.
I mean, he lived in this area, and he was part of our...
Well, they have lots of choices other than choosing the high school mascot and associating a firearms training facility with interscholastic sports. I just see those two things as being completely diametrically opposed.
I agree. Do you think there's any opportunity to change that at all?
Well, I think they absolutely could, because if they wanted to, what you have legally is that is the name of the company, but then you have what's called a DBA, doing business as, and if they wanted to change the name for purposes of marketing and advertising and everything else, they could do that, because they have not even, literally broken ground yet on this facility. It's still in that planning and stage of things.
So it's going into the old Bob's Discount Furniture place, and interestingly enough, it's right next door to an orthopedic surgeon facility, where there's a lot of doctors working together as a collaborative, a lot of patients in and out, and that doesn't seem like a good place for it to be either.
Well, I think I participated in the public hearing recently that we had.
I know you did. You gave good testimony.
Thank you. Before the Zoning Commission, and I thought that I would have kind of a unique perspective as a fairly recently retired public school administrator who has been in a position to have to call a lockdown because of the possibility of a gun in the building, endangering students and staff. So I've had that experience, but I grew up in the Midwest, and I started hunting with my dad when I was 12 years old. I've been hunting on and off since then, even in my adult life. And I'm also licensed to carry a pistol. I have a pistol permit, and I do shoot recreationally. So I have a kind of a unique perspective on this facility.
So you believe in the Second Amendment, and you are a carrier.
Right.
Where in the Midwest are you from?
Illinois.
So
Northern Illinois.
Where, Southern Illinois?
I'm sorry?
Southern Illinois?
Northern Illinois.
Yeah. So there's more open space.
Yeah, we would go hunting in cornfields for pheasant. Or you'd go up into Wisconsin for deer hunting in the winter this time. But
let's back up. Yeah, let's talk about what it was like as a school administrator, and what does that feel like? And
it's very scary. It's very, very scary because, needless to say, as we've seen, most recently in Michigan, with the situation that happened there with the student, and we had violence. We have 4 deaths. I think it was 3 or 4 students, and also a wounded teacher.
Right.
And one of the things that I was reading about, and this made me a little bit upset, was that now they're starting to look at whether the administration could have done more.
Exactly. And I just saw a news feed that came on my phone just a minute ago that said that administration might be sued, and I would imagine boards of ed could be vulnerable if we don't.
And this is something that, as somebody who has sat in that seat, it's a very, very difficult position to take. We had a situation with obviously a mentally ill, student, young man, I think 13, 14 years old, who is drawing pictures, violent images. I've seen that many times at school. Unfortunately, it's because especially our boys are kind of inundated with these violent video games, and they go home after school and they play these violent games. They're shooting at people. There's violence, there's simulated blood, the whole bit. So this boy was making pictures of guns and killing people, and administration called the parents and said, come into school. They recommended that he be taken home and be evaluated, and the parents said no. The parents said no, and as an administrator, you can't force parents to do something like that. On the other hand, these are parents who had just recently bought a firearm. It was not a pistol. It was not locked, and they didn't, go ahead and say, well, let's search the boy's backpack, or let's bring him in, or whatever. So there may have been. It's possible that the administration could have done more, but on the other hand, this is kind of Monday morning quarterbacking.
Right.
And when you ask parents and say, we think your son is really needs professional help, and you should take him home. And they say no. Now, as an administrator, you can't force them.
Right. You're in a tough lose-lose situation. There's really no
So
option.
unfortunately, now they're looking back on it and saying, well, the administration should have done this, they should have done that.
In regard to the Michigan case that just happened last week.
That's right. That's right. So, one of the things that, and this is just to say, we know right now that there's a crisis in mental health.
Absolutely.
In adolescents and pre-adolescents.
We know that.
It's a crisis. It's been brought on by the pandemic, and when you combine that crisis in mental health for our young people with a gun culture, and we are a gun culture.
We are.
Probably one of the strongest ones in the world, and it's part of our history. It's part of what has made our country great, in the sense that we participated in World War I and World War II and Korea, and the fact that we are a country that is a gun culture, or military culture, has been a strength for us. But it's also a weakness, because we have our culture is flooded with guns, and many more people die by being killed by guns in this country on a yearly basis than was done with 9/11 and the number of people who perished in that. Just to give a perspective in terms of the deaths. So my feeling about this facility, this so-called Viking firearms training, The problem I have with it is that it's trying to marry firearms training with entertainment. And that's the part that I vehemently oppose. I don't think these two things should be brought together. And as I testified at the public hearing, no 12-year-old should be dry firing a Glock 9mm in a facility that is being, basically, if we approve this, it's been sort of endorsed by East Lyme, the town of East Lyme. And if we're going to allow that kind of a facility.
Well, it's going to be a regional facility. It's not going to just affect East Lyme. It's going to be a facility that people from other places are going.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But you know, part of the thing at the public hearing was the people who were testifying in favor of it were talking about the character of the owners. One of the owners, I believe, is a retired police officer, or may
I think
still
he's
be
still active duty, was
Okay.
what I had heard. But
Right, and so people were talking about the character of the owners, and I have no problem with that. I mean, there was no question about these are honorable people who are doing this. That's not the issue. The issue is having children, because we're talking about if you're not of 18 years old, you're legally considered a child.
Right. Well, your brain is still developing too, is what people would say in the mental health field.
Right. So, but having even when they said, well, it can't be under 18 or under 16. Oh, I know what it was. Under 16 needed to be accompanied by an adult, all right, or parent or guardian or something. Well, quite frankly, what we saw in Michigan is that you can't necessarily say that the responsible adult is really going to be responsible.
Correct.
You know, are they going to be going there and having a child, 14, 12 years old, dry firing a gun in this facility, and then go out and go into the woods with real guns and real ammunition? Will people be bringing guns in their vehicles, to this facility to go in and sort of simulate what's going to be happening with a video type of, almost a video game type of a setup?
That's what I understand it to be too. There's just so many unknowns, I think, about it too.
But if this facility, and I question in terms of with the business plan whether they felt like they needed to have this entertainment thing, but we have regional police in the area, state police. We also have the National Guard here in East Lyme, which could use it as a training facility. We have the Navy base in Groton that could also use this as a training facility. So there are other, and we also have the Coast Guard Academy, which they could use this as a training facility. So there's no shortage of actually trained professionals with firearms who could be using this facility. Why does it have to move into an area of entertainment that could allow children who could be, as we know, mentally vulnerable?
They are mentally vulnerable.
I can tell you that firing a firearm does create kind of an endorphin rush. It does. I mean, that's one of the reasons that people like to do it. It creates that endorphin rush. And as you said earlier, people with their young children, with their brains developing, both boys and girls, what is going to happen with that kind of a response? Is this going to be promoting the young people, wanting to shoot guns?
Well, my guess would be yes, right? And isn't that why they're doing it? Wouldn't that be their business model, that you get somebody to come a couple of times and then they get a membership and then they continue to come back?
Right. And that is, and I'm not going to take away from if you're talking about of a certain age and there's a responsible supervision. But my concern right now is that there's just this crisis in mental health for young people, and I don't think that a facility like this is gonna help that. If a parent wants to do it on their own,
that's different.
That's different. Then you are a parent. I'm saying, I'm gonna take my son or daughter out to the woods or something, and I'm gonna teach them how to shoot. and that's fine. That's your right as a parent.
Well, that's what
And
your dad
also,
did with you, and
that's
that
exactly
taught you
that's what my dad did with me.
So that was
Right.
safe, and
That's right.
what'd you do? Shoot bottles and cans to start off with?
Basically things
and
like that. Well, actually, we would, because we were pheasant hunting, it would be skeet shooting. So we would
So
go
you throw
to,
a disc up in the
you
air.
have what they call clay pigeons, and you go to a range where they shoot the clay pigeons up in the air, and then you shoot them. But I didn't handle any what we call short arms pistols or revolvers until I was in my 20s. When I was growing up, and you're not hunting with a Glock 9mm
Right.
gun. That's a different type of a weapon. You're hunting with a shotgun or with a rifle or something like that. We call them long arms.
Right.
So, but this facility, at least right now anyway, is not set up to do that. As I understand it, it's really set up as a pistol and revolver facility. So that's what they would be training and allowing children to be trained in that. And I just think that with everything that's going on now, it's creating a risk that doesn't have to happen.
Right, and if there were background checks perhaps on some of the people who would be coming in, the clients, I guess, the users of the facility, if we found out that they had good mental health but
it's not happening.
It's not happening.
No,
and it
it's
won't
not happening. We've tried to do that on a national level, and the NRA, which contributes millions of dollars every year to politicians in Washington.
They have strong lobbyists.
They're one of the strongest lobbies still. They have basically tried to close that down. We have good gun laws in Connecticut.
We do have good gun laws in Connecticut, but even
that doesn't prevent something from happening. And we just saw this past week that we've had schools in Connecticut closing down because of our copycat type of threats.
There was one at NFA just in Norwich.
There was Norwich at NFA. Eli Whitney Technical School in Hamden was closed for 2 days.
That's 2 days of learning for how many kids?
Right.
Like a few thousand kids where they missed.
And you can't make that up.
You can't make
when
that
it's
up.
lost, when it's gone, it's gone. And we've already suffered enough from schools closing during the pandemic.
Exactly, and I'm also just thinking the emotional component that you referred to previously when you were the administrator in a lockdown, that causes endorphins. Endorphins are the good hormones, right?
Yeah,
but it would cause stress and anxiety.
No, it's cortisol is the bad hormone,
right?
And that creates fear and anxiety. And so if you already have children in school who are already feeling anxious because of the pandemic and the effects that's had on that, now you add a layer on of the possibility that they may be in harm's way because there may be a gun in school or somebody's made threats about wanting to shoot up the school. Mm-hmm. It's horrible.
I was in the middle of I was in the middle of a meeting, and actually I was chairing the meeting, and there was a gun, somebody who was armed, walking through the woods at a school where I was working. We were literally underneath the table and hiding behind the desk. We had to, and the shades were kind of broken and ripped, so people could actually look through if they wanted to.
Right.
It's a horrible feeling. I know that from firsthand.
Yeah. And I mean, we're even at a point now with new construction that they're designing schools, not to have windows like that, with the idea that people could be, outside and shooting into the school. And of course now we have, school resource officers as well. But
which is adding to the expense of learning, is causing disruption of learning.
Right.
It's causing anxiety and increased cortisone levels.
Yeah.
That is interrupting and interfering with learning.
Right.
And
I believe, like I said, I do believe in the Second Amendment, but none of the amendments in the Bill of Rights are absolute. None of them are absolute. The First Amendment, people talk about the First Amendment. Well, the First Amendment is not absolute.
Exactly.
There's certain things that you can't say. You can't shout fire in the middle of a movie theater.
Correct.
Okay? So there are limits to the First Amendment, and there are limits to the Second Amendment as well.
So if we
the right to bear arms does not necessarily mean that everyone has the right to carry around guns all the time or any types of guns. And
Well, I agree, and I think that we need to be smart with how we handle our guns, and I didn't see that with this most recent Michigan case. I'm not sure that the gun was in a locked place.
it was not.
In
The
the
parents
home.
did not have, and they may be held liable for doing that. Although Michigan does not have the same law that we do here, where you have to keep guns locked.
Locked, and then the ammunition
Right.
should be stored in a separate place.
Right.
And a child should not have access to those
Right.
kinds of things. And I thought it
And-
was really alarming that the mother said, laugh out loud, don't get caught, next
Yes,
time with the
yes,
text
yes.
message.
Well, we also know, unfortunately, that with the tragedy that happened at Sandy Hook, that Adam Lanza's mother, took him shooting and bought him guns.
Right, right.
So, as much as, 99% of parents are responsible adults, and when it comes to, handling firearms or keeping their families safe, but it only takes 1% of them who are being irresponsible, and I can't even imagine what they're thinking by not having guns locked up and away when they have, especially if you have a child in the home that may have mental health issues.
And pretty much every kid is vulnerable right now with
Absolutely.
what's been going on with the pandemic. And
Absolutely. So, again, I just think that if this facility was limited to professionals requiring professional training in firearms for purposes of protection, I would have no objection to it.
That's one thing, but what's happening is...
But marrying a firearms training facility with entertainment,
Right.
which could allow children to be a part of that, that is, for me as an educator, for me as a parent of 3 boys, this is something that I find very disturbing. I just, this is, I just feel as if it should not be something, and other people talked about, who was it be drawing in, if they're going to be using, if they are going to be using long arms, are they going to be using, these simulated AR-15 semi-automatic weapons? These are not hunting. These are not guns that are used for hunting. You don't use an AR-15 to go hunting.
When you went and testified, were the owners or in the business plan, did you find out what type of gun they're talking about?
It was very clear that they're going to be using fairly high-powered pistols, semi-automatic guns, probably 9mm, 380 caliber, possibly even a more powerful 38 Magnum, 40 caliber guns. They were not really clear about that, but I'm fairly sure that they're not going to be using the little 22s to do these repurposed guns.
And that's what you did when you hunted pheasants in Illinois.
Well, what you start off, if you're going to train a child, you're going to start off with the least powerful gun that's going to do. And most parents or most would start with children or young people with a 22, which is the smallest caliber that you can have. And then as you get older, you'd graduate up. And the same thing for a shotgun. You wouldn't hand a 12-year-old a pump 12 gauge, because it would probably knock them right on the ground.
Right.
You'd start them off with something, the smallest caliber for a shotgun is a .410 size, which is a very much smaller. So, but the gun owners at or the representative, the attorney that was representing them was fairly vague and would not say specifically what caliber these guns they're going to use. But as I had testified and said, I cannot see in any way, shape, or form why a 12-year-old boy or girl should be holding and dry firing a Glock 9mm gun that is what we see carried by our police officers.
Right.
It's just not appropriate.
Right, I agree. I agree. So I'm just wondering if there's anything that we can do moving forward. I mean, we've made our voices heard. People have written letters to the editor. There's been articles written about what has gone on. What recourse do we have at this point, in your opinion?
I'm not sure. I think that probably people should let the Board of Selectmen know, because the zoning commission did approve their permit.
But it was a 4-1 vote, so at
It
least
was.
we had one person who was
But the
concerned, but
permit
it
was
did pass.
still, the permit was still passed, so.
So would the Board of Selectmen potentially be liable if there was somebody who trained at this facility and went out and went on a rampage?
No.
No.
They would not be liable.
Okay.
It would be, if anything, it's very hard because you'd have to have a specific fact pattern to know what happened or what didn't happen, type of a thing. But I think that generally speaking, it would be very hard to hold any public official, the zoning commission or the Board of Selectmen, liable for anything that could happen at this facility. So,
Okay.
and that's, again, and in fact, it may even be that what they're going to do is they are going to have people, I'm sure, sign some sort of a waiver of liability for any kind of injury that could occur, say, in the facility. And then once people leave the facility, it's kind of like there's no more responsibility or liability for the company that is operating the facility.
Well, they have a moral obligation, is my opinion, to think about our community, to think about what we're creating and developing.
That would be a nice thing, Kate, but unfortunately, in capitalism, which is our society,
it's not going to happen.
If you have a profit-making company and this is a profit-making business, that's not their charter. That's
Right.
not their obligation.
Right. No,
you know?
I get it. I get it.
You and I have both worked with or worked for nonprofit organizations. I work for the Meal Center
Right.
as a volunteer chef in New London, and that's a 501c3 nonprofit
Right.
organization, and their mission is to provide services for indigent people or homeless people, and that's what they're looking for. It's not a profit-making business the way that this gun training facility would be.
Okay.
They are there to maximize their profit.
Well, that's kind of scary right there, that
Yes,
we're
it
living
is.
in a world where people are profiting by guns and shooting guns, is my opinion, though, too. So we only have about a minute or so left,
Right.
Spencer, so what strong message do you want to send out to our community to let them know that this is happening, that this is something that could be potentially quite dangerous?
I think that they need to. I think they need to let the Board of Selectmen know how they feel about having a facility like this in East Lyme, and perhaps the Board of Selectmen could put the pressure on the business to separate out the professional training elements with the entertainment.
You're fine with
They
the
could
professional training for people who are in the field and need to develop their skills?
Absolutely. We have military, we have the police, we have first responders, we may have people, for instance, TSA, Homeland Security.
Of course.
Plenty of people who need that kind of professional training. Let's limit it there and not allow this entertainment sector, which could put potentially children at risk of being trained with firearms when mentally they're not able to handle that.
It's just not
That's it.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you so much for being my guest today.
Oh, thank you, Kate.
And
Thank you.
look forward to working with you more and developing more things in town. So
Me
thank
too.
you.
Me too. Thanks again.